Welcome, Esther, to Business Bites. Today we have Esther Deutsch with us from Net at Work. Esther is somebody who I've worked with on a few different things and gotten to know her over the years, and find her to be a very interesting and knowledgeable person. And I thought it would be good to talk to her about the value of having somebody like Net at Work or an expert working in your business. So before we get too far into it, Esther, can you tell us just a little bit about the story of Esther? How did we get to this point right now? Who are you? What do you do? Hobbies, pets, anything that you feel
Sure.
relevant?
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So my name is Esther Deitch, as you mentioned, Keith. It's a pleasure to be here and feel the same. So I guess I don't even know how far back we can go, but let's say over the past
We could
decade
go
or
to day
two.
one if you want.
Well, okay. Since we were talking about farms and cows before, I was born in Cowland in a small town in Pennsylvania. Moved to New
Nice.
York City as a teenager and spent a lot of my life and career there. Studied business undergrad, social work, grad school, and I kind of accidentally, of course, I don't believe there's any accidents, but at that time it felt that way. I landed in the IT technology space while I was in social work school. And fast forward, long story short, I ended up working with what we call a managed service provider, MSP, for
Hmm.
those who might not be familiar with the term, which is an example, a company just like NetSuite Pro, so technically
Hmm.
a competitor, and was there for about 10 or 11
But
years.
they were
So,
nowhere near as fun to work with,
oh, of
right?
course not. Not even a chance. And fell in love with the space, but was like, gotta find NetSuite Pro. No, just kidding. But they were a similar company, type of company. And then about a couple of years ago, I joined this team at Net at Work to work with companies like NetSuite Pro in partnership and alliance to help their clients with things. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but it's what we call LOB, or line of business application.
Hmm.
So I love partnership. I love community building. I've run a couple of networking events on the side and some other groups. I've written some books on it. And just I'm really excited to be here and hopefully share more about line of business and just business in general,
Hmm.
now that we're here for Business Bites.
Yeah, and I will say from a personal experience that you've been very good to work with, very um, sharing information readily, very informative. So no, I've
I
appreciated
appreciate it.
working together. Couple of things in common. One is, yeah, my trajectory wasn't in IT either. If you would have asked me right out of high school or college what I would be doing, I thought I'd be bouncing around in a grader or driving a dump truck. I was working construction, and then I decided that us fat guys don't like standing on hot pavement in the middle of July, especially redheaded fat guys. So I'm like, well, what can I do? I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Data centers are air conditioned. So my IT career was born from like
That's
wanting to
amazing.
be in wanting to be in air conditioning.
And look at you now.
So
Look at you now.
look at me now. Look how far we've gotten. And then the other piece was I'm a Wisconsin guy, and you kind of mentioned farm country. So I would imagine that you can, like I do, appreciate a great glass of chocolate milk.
Oh yeah.
I recently moved out of a town or a city in Minnesota out to the country, and I have a local creamery here. And I can honestly say that the chocolate milk that we can buy there, and by the way, glass bottles, literally will change your life. It is
Oh,
life-changing chocolate milk. It is that good. I On a chocolate milk run, I did actually receive a speeding ticket because of a chocolate milk emergency. So, um,
I'm seeing a theme here,
yeah,
Keith.
yeah. Benefit, hats off to local law enforcement for not understanding the chocolate milk emergency, but whatever, everyone's got a
Criminal.
job to do, right?
No
So,
comment.
so yeah, so yeah, no, Esther, very, very happy to have you with us. And I thought
Likewise.
today, we'll talk a little bit about line of business. We'll talk a little bit about net app work, net, sorry, net at work, not net app.
All good.
Confusing storage with service, but anyway, kind of go through some of those things. So from a high level, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, maybe between the two of us, can we give a little bit of a definition or an overview of what we would consider to be a line of business app? I
Sure.
think it's common to you and I, but maybe some people haven't heard the term line of business app and what that might mean.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I feel like people kind of overcomplicate it and
Hmm.
often don't really know that it's really just software that's meant for helping people or businesses support and streamline their operations. So
hmm
when I start to give examples, I'm like, oh, like HR software, finance software, people are like, oh, okay, I get it. But really, it's
hmm
just software meant to help make your business better,
hmm
more
hmm
efficient, more profitable, better.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Um, so in your mind, how does a line of business app, in which, kind of thinking about it as kind of those bigger, more comprehensive applications that a business gets, how does that differ from, kind of the plain old kind of off the shelf third party applications that you buy? I
so
know I have a mental card, a balloon over my head, but what do you think about it?
yeah, yeah, and I feel, you're really in the weeds helping your clients get this, attain the software and get more streamlined and get more efficient. So I'm sure you have a lot more hands-on, experience to speak to. But from my standpoint, I find line of business applications are generally tailored more to a company's processes, more customized, more tailored, where sometimes, off the shelf could be good. And I'll be honest, sometimes that is a solution and it's great and it
hmm
can be more affordable or just the right thing. But more often than not, it tends to be almost like a one size fits all, which in businesses is hard because,
hmm
yes, businesses are a lot of times similar in a lot of ways, but also they each have their own way of doing things and running business. And so having a software that's customized to that is important. So,
So with a line of business app, so one of these larger applications, you can get the benefit of a third party app in that there's a core that's developed, but then you see, you can customize it, or you can make it fit to your business. Um, how to what degree, just think about net at work and kind of the customers you work with. To what degree do those customers typically um, customize or make those line of business apps their own?
so it really depends on the customer, their budget, of course, and what they're looking to accomplish. But most of the time, we find that businesses tailor their workflows, reporting. We do a lot of work on reporting and a
hmm
lot of integrations. And again, that helps them align with their specific needs. And if they're in a particular
hmm
industry, for example. So I would say those are the main areas that we see as far as
hmm
customization goes.
Okay. So obviously, there's probably, there's soup to nuts as far as like different line of business apps. Maybe give us a little bit of a flavor of what kinds or which specific apps that Net at Work works with, and kind of help us understand a little bit more of your familiarity with those types of apps.
Sure. So another misconception, some people have worked with Net at Work, and I don't know if we mentioned it, but we're about like 500, maybe more at this point, people on staff. So a big team, and I've always surprised with the people that know of Net at Work from just the industry. And one of the misconceptions is that we only work in ERP, which we do a lot of work with ERP and accounting softwares, but we
hmm
also work with CRM, e-commerce, HR systems. And I think a lot of the reason people know us for our ERP is because we are the biggest Sage reseller in North America and big Oracle's NetSuite partner in Acumatica. But again, we work across platforms and across solutions and across categories even as well. So
Um, okay, so that actually made me have a thought, and that is, are there certain industries or certain verticals that two things. One is that you see using more line of business apps, and other certain verticals that you find net at work spending more time in. Not to imply that you can't service many different verticals, but are there certain ones that you see a lot of traction in?
sure, we do. So some of our biggest verticals are manufacturing, distribution, healthcare, and nonprofits. Those are some of our big ones. And that is because in some of the other spaces like legal, they sometimes have very customized software. And again, I can speak to this too from my time in MSP world. Things like Clio or other legal software, for example, aren't as great of a fit for us. But we do a lot in manufacturing and nonprofit, healthcare, medical offices. Those are like some of our biggest industries.
hmm hmm Um, you know, as we think about, kind of the line of business apps, and kind of the fact that they're larger they're larger applications that maybe serve multiple purposes in a business, or have multiple functions. You know, maybe kind of talk a little bit about what's the benefit, or why would an organization want to work with, an expert? What's the benefit of having the expert advice, someone who, or a resource who kind of knows and has experience in working with those kind of applications?
Absolutely. I mean, again, I'll say just from my experience here and having worked with other experts at the MSP, I think having is specifically in this space in software and automation and customization and data and all that, having experts who have specific knowledge about that industry and like years of experience doing, multiple different types of software projects and implementations with that specific knowledge and skill helps in so many ways. I mean,
Hmm.
it's almost like, these projects can be costly and we're very transparent. And I know, you guys work the same with
Hmm.
sharing that beforehand and helping the customers
Hmm.
decide. Like you almost you don't want to think too small because, and maybe we'll talk about that later, but as you grow, you don't want to get a software today, right? That tomorrow as your business scales, you can no longer work for you because that's kind of
Hmm.
silly and it's
Hmm.
so much work to do. But at the same time, you don't want to get something too big. And I think having somebody with experience with your industry and your size clients and the type of business you do and how you do business really helps them recommend the right solution. And the other thing I love personally about Net at Work too is our ability, and it could be Net at Work, it could be another vendor, but just the fact that we have multiple solutions in every category that we support
Hmm.
is a very big deal. And the reason it's valuable is because, if you're, we often come at something, if you're let's say talking to a NetSuite, somebody who just sells NetSuite, or it could be any solution, just sells Sage, often they're going to come at it from a lens of that product, which is not a
Hmm.
bad thing. You just have to understand that. Whereas if you're speaking to somebody who represents multiple solutions, hopefully, just like an MSP is generally more agnostic and really there to hold the hand of the customer and be there for the client, we like to kind of model that format and do the same where we can help guide them to the right solution for what they want to solve for rather than just selling a piece of software. And
Hmm.
to, revert back to the question you asked about how line of business is different from something off the shelf, like that's really how, we start with the solution and what we want to solve for and then work backwards and say,
Hmm.
I mean, often, and I don't recall if we've had conversations with some of your clients about this, but a lot of times the conversation doesn't end in a sell or a product offering. It's more, let's make this software you have now work for you better, or maybe your people aren't trained on using it. There's so many other things that could contribute to something
Hmm.
not working. And so having that, I guess, voice and I say advocate is
Hmm.
powerful. And maybe you could tell my social work background here, but this is what gets me up in the morning. It's really all the same. And
Right.
I used to tell my tech team back at the MSP, like, at least you guys get to close the ticket. You get to solve the problem. And I always
Yeah.
thought that was such a beautiful thing. So for me, that's what gets me up in the morning. And I know we're like-minded in culture and
Yeah.
just feeling like we can help people live better
Yeah.
lives, whether it's through their business or
Hmm.
their software is, the
Yeah.
best thing. So yeah,
There's something that is energizing about, solving problems, or helping people overcome challenges, and being inspirational that way. Um, as you were talking through that, it occurs to me, so if you're working in a medical vertical, and you would have people who understand, things like HIPAA, or working in an industrial vertical, or a manufacturing vertical, you might have people who understand WMS, or warehouse management and automation systems
absolutely.
and those types of things. So if it feels like, is it the case that when doing those types of projects, not only do you guys understand how, how the ones and zeros move through the wires, but you understand why they move the wires and how they need to? Is that kind of a fair thing? Because it's not one size fits all.
You said it perfect, and again, I
Hmm.
think nothing beats I always say like the hands-on experience, especially in tech. It's like medical,
Hmm.
kind of don't want that first day on the
Hmm.
job, although usually they
Hmm.
have training, so they get practice. But I mean, it's all about that practical application and seeing,
Right.
because the software it's like having the engineers not understand, how the software is being used and what the
Right.
user experience is.
Right.
So, yeah,
Well, and something that I encounter, like, and let's just pick on HIPAA and manufacturing. So in HIPAA space, sometimes, again, your basic run-of-the-mill managed services provider, maybe they know HIPAA exists, but they don't have understanding of, you know, the elements of HIPAA that impact the business every day. You know, how important it is to protect like certain duties and certain pieces of information, and you know, and you guys having that resource really helps think about it from 100,000 feet and really propose a solution. You know, like think about it as a solution versus an answer to an individual question, right? So
Absolutely.
in HIPAA, in a broad-based thing like HIPAA, that's an important thing. Um, and you know, in manufacturing, I have to imagine that you know, an everyday provider, I'm not even going to say managed services provider, but an everyday, you know, engineer person might not understand um, how important it is for a printer to work. You know, because if you're in manufacturing, you need to have, you know, trucks leaving docks, right? That's how you make your money is trucks need to leave docks, and the printer that prints the, you know, bill of lading or whatever, and the printer that prints the barcodes that go on the pallets to go on the trucks, if that
Exactly.
doesn't work, then the whole thing stops. So having a provider that understands those things and the importance of those things really can be the secret sauce, right?
100%. 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
this, you're basically describing, what it looks like when we sit down with a client and chat about what they're doing now, what's not working. And it's sometimes hard. It's harder to go back, I would say, from what I've seen too, than almost set it up correctly from the beginning,
Hmm.
and make sure it's done. Sometimes it's like worth the investment of it's time, it's money, of course.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
the what I've seen as far as the results, it's like beautiful. It's magic. So it's worth
Hmm.
it.
So, you know, broadly stated, you know, how do you have any thoughts on um, how line of business apps can help a business with their efficiencies, just overall business if process or business efficiencies?
Absolutely. Something we talk about a lot at Net at Work is digital transformation. And
Hmm.
again, possibly something, as an MSP that you speak to your clients about too. And it's so much larger than, just fixing a single issue. It's usually about elevating the business. So if the client can align their technology with their business objectives and, where they want to grow to and ensure that their software is going to help them with their scalability, they'll get the best ROI. And that's why, we love the partnership that we have so much because it takes a team. And I think
Hmm.
we provide the product expertise, but NetRepro or whoever your managed service
Hmm.
provider is, or somebody like NetRepro is really there to hold your hand, make sure you're taken care of throughout the process, advise, help you with, again, what we call the
Hmm.
digital transformation and help with the full picture,
Hmm.
because your software is
Hmm.
one piece of it, but they also have
Hmm.
insight into other areas of your organization, not just your IT. A good
Hmm.
MSP has more. So I think together we make a strong uh, case
Yeah,
for
when
the
I
client.
think, yeah, when I think about how we, you know, kind of how we work together and how we interact and things, a lot of times, you know, it's the role of the expert, like, you know, the net at work team to like deeply understand the tool, but also deeply understand like the pieces that we talked about around the tool, the regulatory pieces, and you know, like HIPAA and those types
Sure.
of things. And you know, from a managed services or a partner perspective, you know, it's our job to understand the customer and to help you guys. You know, part of what we need to do as the good customer partner is help you guys understand, you know, the business, the things that are important to the business, and maybe some of the humans that are in the business, to really kind of get that tight integration, to align the application of the use of the line of business tool with the needs of the business. And the more we understand the customer and the better you understand the application, the tighter that integration gets with that customer and that tool that they're using.
So well
So.
said. And we
Mhm.
can't forget the security component too, which, that is not our forte. So again, the MSP can
Mhm.
help with making sure that the best in class security protocols are there, that vulnerabilities
Mhm.
are monitored for. You
Mhm.
mentioned HIPAA, right? If there's regulation or compliance
Right.
requirements, those are
Well,
important.
yeah, and many times, like, you know, in my experience in working with manufacturing, many times the tools that manufacturers have to use, um, you know, may or may not be compliant with the most current
Yeah.
security standards, right? So being able to understand those tools and how to implement mitigating controls around the perimeter, around the outside of those line of business apps, and protect them in other ways is an important thing. And that kind of gets into kind of one of my next, my next thought was, how does working with an expert or somebody like Net at Work, how does that really help reduce things like downtime and kind of overall technical issues? Because these applications are large and they're far reaching in the landscape of the business. The tentacles usually go far and deep. So how does working with an expert help kind of avoid some of those downtime issues and the disruption to the business implementing large apps could cause?
Yeah. And again, this is, I feel, why planning is so important. And so much of what you see kind of at the other side of it happens before. It's like, I almost imagine like a flower that's being like, kind of like watered underground and then it just
There's that
sprouts up.
social work days coming up.
Yeah.
The beautiful
But I do
flowers.
think of line of business that way and
Yeah.
software, like so much of what goes wrong, unfortunately, sometimes you see the wrong side, but so much of what goes wrong or right is not in the actual, it's not when everyone hits go.
Yeah.
And you see this in all areas of IT. I'm sure your team knows. Again, that's why I think MSPs are so critical. Like somebody has to really take the time to map, to plan. And we start all our engagements, I don't say projects, conversations with some form of business mapping and
Hmm.
planning.
Hmm.
And there's a very structured approach here
Yeah.
with what that looks like.
Well, and that's super important. I think of, I mean, I in no way should I make fun of the flower reference because I think of the technology scape as an ecosystem. So it's kind of the same thing, right? And in every ecosystem, once in a while, a skunk walks through, right? Right. So we
That's a
want to be
great
able to,
analogy.
yeah, we
Yeah.
want to be able to understand where the skunks are, avoid the
Yeah.
skunks. I mean, let's be honest. I'm a grumpy guy. I like grumpy animals. I like skunks,
I didn't
porcupines, and
know.
badgers. Any mal-tempered animals on Team Keith. So, yeah, but we want to avoid those when we're thinking about our technology ecosystem. And you kind of this fits hand in hand is like um, when you're working together as an expert. Part of it is the data piece of it, right? How the machines work and talk together. The other piece of it is the human. So, do you guys have any capability to help with the human teams of that business to understand and to know that business application?
Yeah. And I was literally just thinking that too.
Great
That's another
minds think
thing.
alike,
Yeah.
Esther.
Well,
Great
thank you.
minds think alike.
If I think anything like you, I'll be a very happy woman. So
Well, I don't know about that. Well, hey, the good news is it's usually just misdemeanors, never felonies, so you're all right with that.
I'm on my way
So,
to get my
yeah,
chocolate milk. I'm just kidding.
tickets, no jail time.
Just chocolate milk.
Yeah, just
Free
chocolate milk.
chocolate
Yeah,
milk.
yeah.
So I was just going to mention that we offer structured training, change management support, and we also do a lot of work speaking and involving end users early in the process. And
Hmm.
again, you mentioned the human element, also something I'm
Uh,
passionate about. So
that what you said right there that's a critical piece of it because um, you don't what in my experience, what you
yeah,
don't want as a business is to have a team that feels disenfranchised. So
1000%.
if we can have Super Esther show up and start engaging people earlier in the process, they feel empowered and they feel another social work word, but they feel empowered. They feel like
It's
they're
my
part of
favorite
it.
word.
They feel ownership in the process, and sometimes sometimes ones and zeros people can overlook that human piece of it. So I think that's a very important point that you made.
You're
You
speaking
know,
my language, and you'd be shocked how much the people element and getting that right impacts the technology. And I know maybe we'll talk about AI later, but I have to just insert people who are like, "What do you think about AI? What's going to happen?" I'm always like, "AI is great," or we like, "You need people. You people are
yep,
never going to be replaced." I've said
humans.
that since I was.
And
I'll
I
say it all
mean,
day. Yeah,
in my past life, you know, I wasn't part of it, but I did see a large scale. I came in at the end of it, and we had to redo it. But a large scale CRM project failed, And why
Mm.
did it fail? It failed because the humans weren't thought of in the process. The humans dug their heels in, and it became, this won't work, right? So it just didn't work. So that project had to be, crumpled up, thrown in the garbage, and then it was reconstituted a year later. And what we did at that time was we heavily engaged the people who were, against it before. And that piece is so important. You can do everything right technically, implement everything right technically, and if you forget the people, that's a huge part. So that's part of the benefit of working with an expert that understands those types of things.
And it's the people using it too, because you
Yep.
oftentimes you have people that are so far removed from the and they're like, oh, we don't need that or we need that, this and it's why don't we ask the people who are using it, on the day to day. I think it's important. I mean, you need the high level lens because that gives you where it's going, what you're trying to
Hmm.
accomplish and more bigger picture, but you can't forget the individuals, like you said. So
Yep.
it's spot on. Yeah.
Um, let's think about this a little bit, and it's kind of in the same vein. How does working with an expert ensure that those line of business apps align with the business's goals?
Yeah. I mean, I think we might have, kind of touched on this already, but um, as long as it sounds like crazy because it's so new, it's very similar of
Hmm.
just the end result is the same, but it's starting from the problem rather than the
Hmm.
software. Because we
Hmm.
get people that come to us and say, hey, we want to look at NetSuite or we want to look at this product, and we're like,
Hmm.
wait, great, like we can show you that,
Yeah.
we show you, but like let's take a step back. What led you to get there? And sometimes when we dig back some of those layers, there's I don't know, another solution that maybe they should look at first, or again, it's not a solution they need. So,
Hmm.
it's easy to say like, oh, does this product fit? But
Well,
I think, yeah,
I was gonna say, well,
starting
it's kind of
point.
like asking that question of, what hurts, right? And just
Exactly.
listen, and then just listening to and let them talk, and understanding, you know, what is the problem that we're trying to solve type thing, it's a
Exactly.
piece of it. So,
Yeah.
um, on with that, so we've talked a lot about, like, implementing in the early part of the application process. How about ongoing maintenance and updates for those apps? Um, we've gone through the project, we've ballyhooed our success. Woo, everybody had their sandwich and their party. All right, so now we're a few months down the road and it needs to be updated, or there's maintenance that has to happen on it. Do you have people that can help with that?
So we do, and this just came up yesterday because a partner of ours, was asking me like, how far does Network go? Like, can it do this? Can it do that? And I just kept saying yes, yes, yes. We got to the last piece of like, do you do this? And I said, let me just find out. 99% sure. And I went back to the team and they said, yep, all of it, all of it. So that's another thing. I think that's given us the reputation we have is just and again, it could be Network, it could be somebody else, but finding a partner who does more than just put the software in, even if they do a great job with that, you're gonna have ongoing needs. To your point, things are going to change. You're going to have a new user who doesn't know how to use it or needs training. And so have somebody who's going to be there for you ongoing. And it could certainly be us, it could be somebody else. But yes, there is ongoing support, ongoing updates, ongoing change management, process, things that you're going to want to have somebody to turn to. And that's another reason people like to use us or somebody like us when they're doing a software. But like you can go direct to one of, we call them publishers. You can go direct to Sage. You can go to direct to NetSuite.
Hmm.
But we find more often than not having a third party implementer is actually critical, especially somebody like us with such strong relationships with the
Hmm.
publishers, and deeply entrenched in there, so that if there is an issue, or even not even if there is an issue that's reactive, but even to be proactive. And again, I think an MSP works a lot in the same way to help make sure that things are set up right from the get-go. And you nailed it before by saying, like you can like create this great software, sell it, whatever, put it in, and then the users can't use it. Like it costs money and time and effort and investment to have your users be involved in the beginning. And I would say even as far as the selection process where possible, or at least understanding why you selected something. But it costs so much more to have to
Hmm.
go back and do it after, not to mention the waste of time, the headache. Like, and I can speak to this myself. I mean, I mentioned events. I think before we started talking, I do a lot of events on the side, and I'm working on building better event software, and I'm using existing, but like customizing it. And I just want to push ahead, get the event down. I have a lot of people like, just do what you have so far. And me with my background is like, no, I want to do this right. I want to set it up right now from the get go so I don't go back because, yes, it's going to be a longer time now to get there, but it's worth it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're just going to keep growing and growing. And you want to have the software and the IT and support to do that as you scale. You don't want to go back. It's not as good. It can be done, but it's not as efficient. Yeah.
In your experience, in your experience, maybe a high level on what's the process, or how do you help a company that maybe has kind of these out of date or older legacy apps, these legacy apps existing, and they know they need to have a change, and like, how do you help them understand how to make the change to a new kind of a line of business application, I guess, from the old
Yeah,
legacy app.
I love that you brought that up next because it really is directly correlated to, because as much as I say, do it once, do it right, do it from the beginning, that was part of our culture back at the MSP.
Hmm.
Like all the time, we have, things happen, people leave, things get stale, and not always is there a budget to do things when they need to be done. So let's say you come to that point where you're like, okay, this is bad. Like we're in a bad place, and it happens all the time. Uh, we have a very strong process phase approach to help with assessing, mapping, training. But the main thing is to allow for minimal downtime. And I can't say it's always possible not to have any downtime, but
Hmm.
planning for it, right? At least trying to schedule it at a time that's least interruptive, making sure there's as little downtime as possible. Those are things where having someone on your team and on your side, and also working with your MSP who is involved in a lot of these or can be and knows your infrastructure and knows your environment to help work with it in the background so it doesn't disrupt your day to day as much as it could or might. So that's critical. And then I would also say that having, I was going to mention that we have also what we call a whole program called NetSuite Orphans.
Hmm.
I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but that's what we call them. They're my NetSuite babies that sometimes go direct. It could be NetSuite, it could be another
Hmm.
publisher, and
Hmm.
software is great. It's only as good as what you do with it. The most powerful software is sometimes not the best. And that's another thing that I've seen here. When they talk to the MSP, because you guys really understand the environments and the culture of the people you're working with. And that's also why that relationship with, whoever's listening with your MSP is so critical, that they know you and your business and your IT, all of it,
Hmm.
not one or the other. Because the right something that's overly complicated, for example, that may be a more powerful piece of tech with the wrong people who maybe need a more simple piece of software
Hmm.
that doesn't do as much is better. So that piece that you provide to us, as you mentioned earlier, and then us coming in and saying, okay, you know what, normally for construction, we might recommend an Acumatica, but maybe that's a little bit too much for these
Hmm.
people. And who cares if it has all these great features if they're never going to use it because they just
Hmm.
can't? Or maybe it's, we have to work in, extra training for them so they can use this piece. Like those little nuances are, I think, what make the difference
Hmm.
between success and failure. And that's where, you and us and them all being pieces of it really matter. So,
So thinking about that, I guess, and kind of the way you're describing that, and we're thinking about a business that might have had these legacy apps, and now they're putting in this new thing. So how does an expert help ensure that those apps are scalable for future growth? Maybe today the company is this size, but they're going to scale out. They're experiencing tremendous growth. How does working with an expert help ensure that those apps are scalable? And what types of things are you maybe thinking about?
that's a great question. So again, that's why going into the initial like conversations and talks with growth in mind. And it sounds kind of basic, but it's really not. I mean, knowing where the business wants to go, like, are they going to, let's say, you mentioned manufacturing, for example, let's say they're doing, one area now, but are they going to end up having additional warehouses or
Mhm.
needs modes of transportation, other ways that they're going to need to use the software down the road, even if they don't have it now. So knowing that they have the flexibility within the software to expand in that way, right, not just grow and integrate with, let's say, potential other softwares or systems in the organization is something that I think is really important going in.
Mhm. Mhm. Earlier we kind of talked about, um, compliance and kind of the fact that when like the different verticals that are serviced, there's resources who maybe have HIPAA knowledge or PCI knowledge or warehouse automation knowledge, so those experts exist. um, Thinking about how does an expert, or how's working with an expert help an organization ensure alignment with standards, and how does it help secure that organization from, or help keep that organization secure relative to like cybersecurity? I would assume that you probably have access to people who are knowledgeable in that space as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think having somebody who is current with what the regulations are, they've done it before, they know like, hey, when you set up the software, it could be as simple as like turn on this feature, make sure there's this data requirement happening. But you need the knowledge. I mean, that's to your point, that's
Hmm.
exactly it. Just somebody who
Hmm.
has that, longstanding
Hmm.
knowledge and experience in that particular area
Hmm.
is super helpful. And also, you want to make sure that when you're setting up the software and you're going into the project again, you don't want to kind of go back. I mean, besides
Hmm.
for that being troublesome, it's also, once you're talking about regulations and stuff, you could hit legal issues, of course, if you're not set up correctly in the beginning. So I
Right.
think just adding it to the design of the apps, the reporting, the workflows, again, working with the
Hmm.
MSP to say, like, hey, who's taking care of their security protocols, the
Hmm.
vulnerabilities, the updates? Is it us? Is it you? And just asking the questions, because that's another thing I
Hmm.
saw at the MSP. A lot of times the end user or customer isn't as they shouldn't be. Like they don't have this knowledge of even what to
Hmm.
ask. And then after the fact, or when there's a breach, or which is inevitable these days, they'll say, "Hey," or I say a vulnerability, they'll say, "Hey, like I thought you were doing this, or I thought you were doing that." And there's a lot of could be a lot
Hmm.
of pointing fingers, and at the end of the day, the main thing is that they're taken care of, and that could be uh, not handled well. So I think
Hmm.
you know, again, having somebody who's advocating for you and asking those questions before so that you're not
Hmm.
picking up the pieces, when there's an issue
Hmm.
after the storm is good.
Hmm. Um, we're kind of coming up on time here, so before we do, I wanted to get one last question in, and you alluded to it earlier. What are your thoughts on AI in this space? Do you see things happening? Um, I'm I'm asked about it almost every day about AI and what's
Yeah.
going to do, and I think that I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Number one, like maybe what it's doing in the space, and number two, where you see it overall fitting in, and maybe in your business or your experience, just kind of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I also get this question a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm such a strong advocate. Maybe it's my age or generation. I mean, part of the reason I fell in love with tech and also kind of fell into it accidentally was just because it's always evolving and I love new things and
Mm-hmm.
shifting status quo. So I think that's just what AI is exciting for me. It's just something new. But I think that, and to me, it's like untapped potential.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so let me say two things. Let me say that is transforming line of business. It is doing amazing things in line of business, doing amazing things in businesses. I see it every day. I'm lucky I'm around people who are immersed in AI. I mean, we've taken it, I don't want to say fully on, but
Mm-hmm.
like we're embracing it as an organization, and it's helping automate tasks. It's helping with better decision making,
Mm-hmm.
better data, better marketing because of better data, better reporting, like more insights, and just more efficiency and more driving business goals, which again, I think we're all in the business ultimately
Mm-hmm.
of helping businesses evolve and grow. So yes, yes, and yes. Uh, my general belief in life, and again, you'll see my background reflected, but I think, everything is a tool. And I say this about money. I say this about the way that I see it is it's not good or bad.
People often describe me as a tool, so that's a very.
I think you're good. So I don't know
I
if you're a
think they say
tool.
it,
Maybe you're a good tool.
yeah, but they say it with love in their voice, right?
But I got bad eggs, so it's fine. I got potential. I got
Yeah,
potential. So
potential.
I got potential. But I think it's never about the thing, it's how we use it. And so I'm always like, let's not push it away. Let's embrace it and let's use it correctly. Because of course, with every potential for good, there's
Hmm.
potential problems. Yes, there are risks. Yes, let's not close our eyes and be naive and,
Just watch
ensure we
Star
have
Wars, you'll see that.
exactly, exactly. I was actually just at the Star Wars land in Disney, by the way.
Oh, nice. Very
Yeah.
nice.
Recommend for the first time.
got your new Wookiee tattooed there, so
Yeah,
that's very
shout out to Disney fans, but yeah, yeah. So don't do that.
nice.
But
It was
yeah.
interesting. I was talking to another old person like me who's been in IT 30 years, which is sad to think about. But anyways, us two old guys were talking about when we were kids and stuff like that. Kind of had a couple get off our lawn comments. But anyway, 10 years ago, if somebody was talking about getting into IT and technology, we would have recommended like being a developer, right?
Mm,
I don't know that I would recommend that anymore because,
mm-hmm.
AI is writing code.
That's a
How
really good
how
point.
interesting is it that, AI is writing code. So what, probably, recently 5 years ago was a great job, great paying job, and there weren't enough of those people out there, is going to become table stakes because AI has the ability to write the code, to review the code, and to implement the code. We
Oh,
were talking about
100%.
it. I'm like, I'd probably just tell them to be like a network engineer or something because you think about because everybody, 'cause we're all going to depend on connectivity, right? Just like
Totally.
in every
Totally.
house, hey, they're never going to get rid of toilets, right?
So true.
They're never going to get rid of plumbing, and think about, we have become so dependent on our connectivity piece of it that I'm like, the job of the future might be network engineer because it's the digital plumbing, right? It's how everything connects and interconnects. It's AI is making this kind of a brave new world.
Yeah, and I think, yes, it will eliminate certain jobs to your point, and it's
Hmm.
sad, and but it also creates so many new ones. And I
Yeah,
was kind of young then, so I can't really say I remember, although I feel like I do. I think, probably similarly when Google came out, people were like, "What are we gonna do? The world's gonna end. How is this generation gonna have any brains?" And granted, we might have a little less, but like I think we're okay. So I kind of see it the
we
same
were
way.
the old guy and myself were talking about, I remember sitting at a conference table in a past life, hearing about this new business called Amazon that's selling books,
Ah,
and they're going to run negative for how long? What are you talking about? That'll
yeah,
never work. That's crazy. That'll never work. Just like this Windows thing will never catch on. I'm old enough to remember before Windows. So, right. So number one, don't ever ask me for stock advice because obviously I'm a very bad predictor. And number two is like you just you know it's a brave new world. Like you said, jobs that are common in 5 years don't exist today.
exactly.
How
But
strange is that?
you gotta, I think the people that thrive are those that embrace the change and
Right.
look for ways to capitalize on it and make it and not run from it. And that's another reason
Yeah.
I've always loved tech because I find the people I work with, whatever
Yeah.
generation they're
Yeah.
from, they're so
Yeah.
much more like open to.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
seen that across generations, to
I would
change. So
imagine in this line of business space it's going to be similar.
yeah,
Think about 10 years ago the social media marketing didn't exist as a job, and now
exactly.
yeah. So yeah, it's keeping our eyes to that and just understanding and, like you said, embracing the change. So.
I just mentioned real quick too, I follow amazing
Hmm.
account on Instagram.
Hmm.
So I'm just looking at one's called Six Figure Thoughts, if anyone's listening, spelled out, and one's called
Oh.
Visionary Minds with two Y's. They both go into like the background. They like Amazon was one of the ones they did where it's like
Hmm.
you see it. The idea was to show that, sometimes things go down, then they go up, but
Hmm.
there's, you can make
YouTube was
success
like that.
from, yeah,
I remember
yeah,
sitting at that same conference table in the office building, and they're like, "Yeah, YouTube video content, this and that." I'm like, who would do that? Like, why would you put all your video? What kind of? How are they going to have enough storage to have that much video content distribution? There's no way. That's crazy.
here
Yet
we
here we
are.
are
I
again.
know.
Again, don't ever come to Mr. Swingle for stock advice because I'm obviously do the opposite.
It's funny.
So, well, Esther, we're at the end of our time. I really appreciate, you're talking to us and sharing your thoughts. If
Course.
someone wanted to get a hold of you after this, uh, what would be the easiest way to do that? Is it email? Is it give you a call? What do you prefer?
I think LinkedIn would be fantastic. I'm very active on LinkedIn, as some of
Okay.
you know, so that's the easiest. It has all my links there, and then from there you can, go crazy.
Yep.
You could
Okay.
also visit our website, which is netatwork.com, and
Yep.
check that out if you're interested in learning
Right.
more. But
And
appreciate you
and
having
I'll
me.
I'll put that up on a screen so everybody can see that and have access to it. So
Perfect. Thanks,
thank you
Steve.
again for your time today, Esther. Time flew.
Thank
It
you.
went so fast
Oh, it was
today.
great.
It was
Yeah,
nowhere near as painful as we thought it
gonna
would
get
be,
some
right?
chocolate milk and then we can do another
Yeah, we get
hour.
some chocolate milk and do another hour. That's right. I'll see if I can ship some down to you because it is life changing. You'll be a
You got to
different
put
person.
some ice in there in
Yeah,
Florida.
right. Very
Yeah.
good. Well, thank you, Esther.
I appreciate it.
Have,
Thank you,
have a
Keith.
good
Good
rest of the week.
seeing
Take
you.
care.
You
Bye
too.
bye.